Hi, this is Anna Imagination. Welcome to The Ethical Asshole, and I am your host, the Salty Bitch. So, I am working on societal psychology, and I can't say I'm really working on it. It's something that it encompasses everything that I do. Societal psychology is, oh my God, is it fun? It is understanding the 12 ethical stages of perspective growth, using Pythagorean psychology to integrate it inside all of us to see how we're all moving together. It's already there. We're born with this. And then seeing how the 12 ethical perspectives move and interact with each other. But the majority of our population has only made it to the fourth ethic. Meanwhile, the fifth and the sixth ethic are now merging, and you've got the seventh and eighth ethics also now starting to appear. Now, here's the interesting thing. A society says, according to the last 100 million years of research, that there are 5 personality types only, 5 ethical stages that are only allowed to be present and established in a societal format at any given time. So every time the new one comes in, the last one has to fall off. This is why we have currently ethical societies that are second ethical perspective, third, fourth, fifth, and now sixth. As soon as the seventh starts to form, the second is going to drop off. So says Mother Nature, just the way it. I don't know why we do this. I haven't figured out the reason why yet. But there's something about us. And this is the other thing that's really fascinating is you have this core piece. The core piece is that center heart of where everyone moves. And basically this piece is able to communicate with this piece and this piece, but this piece in that middle cannot communicate with this piece. Basically, we have a third perspective expanse only. And because we're interconnected, there's no one aside from this one. Basically, every perspective requires 2 supports. So the third ethical perspective can support the second and the first, the second and the first, which is why the first isn't around, is because it can't support the first. And the reason why it can't support the first is because it's not next to the first, because it's only has a range of second and third. It's really, let's try this differently. The second supports the first and the third supports the second and is also supported by the first, which is why there's a society that is the second ethical perspective. Meanwhile, you've got the third ethic, which is being supported by this is so much easier to say than what I was trying to say the first time. So the third ethical perspective is being supported by the second and the fourth. And the second and the fourth are solid and established, which is why we have a third ethical perspective society in pockets. In addition, we have the fourth, which is supported by the fifth and also by the third. And the fifth is now starting to take hold because the sixth is starting to develop a pocket of people. And that supports the fifth, and which is also supported by the fourth. Now, so this is my hypothesis. This is why as the seventh develops to support the sixth and the fifth is supported by the sixth, that's going to shift everybody. And now this falls off. So the second's going to fall off. It's really interesting how we all move together. And there's just nowhere on this planet where we see a first ethical perspective society. The last time we saw that was the Neanderthal. Literally, the Neanderthal was the last time we had a first perspective ethical society. The Neanderthal, that's how long ago that was. We just don't support the first ethical perspective because our society can only hold 5 stages. So as the seventh comes in, which is what's happening now, you're going to see the second drop off. Now, this is interesting. The seventh ethical stage is the I'm going to observe and listen, while that second ethical perspective is religion and tradition, which is why religion and tradition is significantly declining, while that seventh ethic is starting to form and build up. Now, the seventh ethic, and I love this. The seventh ethic is all about learning, education, and discipline. Now, the seventh ethic, while it's here, is going to get stronger and nourished by the sixth. And also the eighth is starting to take hold. But it's going to speed up and it's going to definitely move in that direction. It's natural evolution. But it's going to take a while to get there, just not as much time as it took for these other ones to develop. And the reason why is because this is physics. This is literally how momentum works, is once you start to build up energy and momentum over here, it starts to build up speed and energy, and then it propels it forward. So you're building up momentum at the first, second, third. And then by the time you get to fifth, sixth, and seventh, the whole thing is like self-automated. And that's really when things settle down and take off. So this entire section right here from this point past was just hypothesis. This is just an observation that we don't have anything that's fifth perspective, or I'm sorry, we don't have anything that sustains more than 5 ethical stages at any given time. And that's just my hypothesis as to why. But again, I really don't know why. That's why it's an hypothesis. And that's something I'm trying to figure out, is why can't we have? I really don't understand why. So I'm interested to learn more about that as I do more research into it. So societal psychology is literally how we all interact. It's the chemistry of psychology. So in psychology, it's all about the physics. And then when you get into societal psychology, it's all about the chemistry. It's how this group interacts with this group and how things go boom when those two groups come together. So it's really interesting to see how they all fit together. And I'm currently shaping my YouTube channel and my research. My research is going forward. My research always goes forward. And I live in the abstract, coming to you live from the abstract. And everything that I'm report on is just from my lab in my research, where I'm just pulling up more data. And right now I have a number of projects I'm working on. One of them is linguistical physics. And linguistical physics is seeing how words move exactly and according to the laws of physics, and how those words have an effect on both our subconscious mind and our cognitive core, as well as each other. Now, every individual is run by their cognitive core. So when I give you a word, it's your cognitive core that is perceiving that information, processing that data, and then either implementing it into your own psychological cognitive core, or you're saying, I'm an idiot, and you leave, which is okay too. So what you decide to do with the words that come across your path, we have 140,000 bits of data that our brains receive every day. And that all goes into your cognitive core for processing to figure out, is this good? Is it bad? Specifically, is it good for me? Is it bad for me? Is this nourishing for me? Is this going to destroy me? And those are pretty much your options. This is what love and not love is. This is your dichotomy of good and evil. It is literally, is this going to nourish me to grow, love, or is this not? And that's where it gets toxic and it's disintegration. It's what I like to call consumption. So your subconscious mind is literally processing through all that every single day with all of the bits of data that comes into it. Now, while this is going on, that's the linguistical physics. While that's going on, I'm also researching the 12 ethical stages of human growth, which of course, that's like the core of all of my research, and how that is the pattern of growth and evolution through our society. Now, these are all the components that make up the science of growth, which is all I talk about on my podcast, is the science of growth. But more specifically, how it affects you, because if you don't know how to grow, you're going to make bad choices. You're going to put the wrong material inside of your cognitive core, and that's going to delay your growth and or completely derail you, and you're going to end up with consumption, which is the opposite of not growing, and you're going to disintegrate, which is literally what all disease and mental illness is. It is the disintegration due to not growing and keeping pace with time. Keeping pace with time is growth, because time is moving. Now, if you're moving on pace with time, you're growing and you're fine. But if you're not growing, or if you're growing slower than time is moving, you're going to start to age. You're going to start to get mental illness. That's where mental illness is. That's that. And then that leads to, well, physical deterioration until including death. So it's really interesting to see how all of these pieces interact. It is a sequence. And that's the other part, the other component that I'm looking at. I'm also looking at academic discipline to see how these disciplines, which is the sequence of the 12 ethics, are interacting with the growth progression and how we move along them. Basically, they are the tools, the academic tools, are the academic disciplines, are the tools that we use to nourish our growth progression. So if you do not have proper, adequate, or correct knowledge in the academic disciplines and in the right sequence, you're not going to have the preparation you need to ensure your growth. Now, there are symptoms of growth. Some of those symptoms of growth is happiness, prosperity, abundance, and wealth, and joy. Some symptoms of not growing is misery, death, disease, mental illness, and sadness, depression, suicide. It gets really bad over here. So you really want to make sure that you are growing, that you do have the adequate tools to ensure your growth, and you also want to make sure that you are following the proper sequence, which is the order of operations, so that you know that you are getting the optimization of your environment so you can grow properly and efficiently. Now, one of my biggest challenges is taking all of this knowledge from the abstract, translating it into something that the average person can understand without using big words. And now that's usually where I run into a problem. So what I'm thinking about doing is having a video editor come in and just like paste simple words or something else on the screen, which would be really great, so that it translates a lot of the stuff that I'm saying, because I know that the stuff I'm saying doesn't make sense to a lot of people. And I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out, which is why I'm studying linguistical physics, is to try and figure out how to translate all of this really awesome shit into something that everyone can understand. And right now, the only tools I've got for that is pop culture, which isn't bad. It's just pop culture. So I got one tool that I can use. So what I do a lot in my videos is I reference a lot of movies to translate a lot of what I'm saying using metaphor. Speaking of which, metaphor is the other thing that I use a lot of to try and translate this. The problem with metaphor is when you're a literal thinker or a concrete thinker, which is what happens between the first and the fourth perspective stages, they don't know what metaphor is, because that is an abstract concept, and you don't get abstract concept until you're approximately in the fifth ethical perspective stage. So everyone who's a foundational between the first and fourth perspective is going to really struggle understanding metaphor, because this is an abstract concept. Now, I'm already speaking abstractic. So as I speak abstractic and then I try and translate it over into metaphor, just so I can get it over to the foundationals. And that's now where we have a problem, because it's an abstract concept. The abstract concept and the struggle with concrete and literal thinkers branching over into metaphor is basically abstractic is imagination. That's the language of imagination. It's the ability to form your mind around a concept that is not literally right in front of you. And if you have a problem with imagination and or creativity, you are going to struggle with this concept. So if you have significant mental health, one of the symptoms of significant mental health is your inability to use metaphor, abstract, imagination, and creativity. In fact, the more literal you are, it's a really good sign that you're no longer growing, your imagination is gone, and you are in the consumption stages, possibly in the late consumption stages. The more intelligent you are, the healthier you are, and the more you grow is also really vital to your overall health. Now, this is where it gets interesting. If you were to look and translate all of this into sequence of mathematics, basically you have the calculus part of your brain. You also have your logic part of your brain, which is the ordering and the sequencing. And then you have the mathematical part of your brain. Now, this is where a lot of people don't know what math actually is, so I'm going to translate. Math is the symbolism of logic. It's symbolism. It's symbolism. It's symbology. I really hate to use the word symbology, but let's go ahead and use it. So math is actually symbology. Logic is what you're learning in mathematics, but you never learned logic. So you're just learning the symbology or the shorthand of logic without learning logic, which is why 40% of the population struggles with mathematics, is because you're just learning symbology or shorthand for another language you never learned. It's like learning the alphabet without actually learning how to read. It's exactly what that is. So calculus is the ability to calculate distance, time, and all that jazz. But that is literally calculating time. It's calculating speed. It's calculating distance. So what you're doing in calculus is you're measuring change. That's really what you're doing, is you are measuring change. So you might have point A, which is logic. That's your origin. And then you have B, which is also logic because it is the sequence of A to B. Now, A is actually a sentence and B is another sentence. Let's say it's this sentence. But mathematics is going to replace these sentences with A and B. Now, you can't understand the relativity of A to B until you measure this, which is calculus. So now calculus measures what is happening between A and B. Now you need all three of these things inside of your mind to understand what's going on. But more importantly, what I'm actually saying to you is communication, mathematics, all of it. Logic, linguistics, calculus, trigonometry, mathematics, algebra, course 1 material is just the science of communication. But the foundation and the origin of communication is linguistics, logic, and words, storytelling. And the foundation of that is theater and stage and epic poetry. Theater, stage, epic poetry. But because the majority of you did not take theater classes with stage, you probably don't know very much about human connection, the fourth wall, interacting with people, and delivering a message. You also probably do not understand the science of storytelling, which is also what all of this is about. This is literally where the science of storytelling branches off into its own thing. So if you want to be a storyteller, you really need to study linguistics, logic, math, and calculus in order to understand sequencing and order of events. There's a formula, because it's math, that Pixar uses in their Pixar movies, because it's math. And this is the same formula that all writers and authors use when they write a book, because it's math, which is, what do you want? Where are you going? What's the obstacle that's preventing you from getting it? And that equals your story. What do you want? What's the obstacle, conflict? There's your story. How you get what you want while overcoming your obstacle is story. By the way, if you haven't figured it out yet, that is exactly what you are living. You are living your own story, which is what you want, where you are going, what is in your way, and the process you use to overcome this obstacle to get to your destination. Now, the problem that is the obstacle and how you overcame this obstacle to achieve your reward is also mathematics, because you are using calculation to determine precisely the navigation you need to get to the endpoint. You're using logic to figure out the sequencing, and you're using mathematics to translate all of this into another language symbolically called metaphor in order for other people to understand you. So knowing this about story and knowing this about physics and about mathematics and calculus and logic and linguistics, and then trying to translate everything I've got over to you guys is my story. So here I am over in the abstract world at the edge of the frontier going, I've got all this really... The abstract's over here. I've got all of this really interesting, awesome information. And I want to give it over to you. But in order to get it over to you, I'm going to have to figure out and solve the obstacle. The obstacle is our communication barrier. Our communication barrier is 100% determined by our reception and transmission. And now we're getting into physics and economics, because this is how people connect in a network. Economics is nothing but pure physics. It is literally how well your receptor can receive and how well my transmitter can transmit. And it's also how well in the health, the overall health of this connection. Now, when you get this gorgeous connection, it creates and produces its own energy called synergy. It's really cool. And now you've got a fortified and embellished and even better circuit. This is physics. So now I can start relaying and using my words to transmit and transfer all of my data, my information from the abstract, on over to you. Now, this is where things get difficult, because I speak another language called abstractic, which is science talk for the abstractic on the pioneering frontier of life. Now, a lot of scientists can understand me because they already have a lot of the vocabulary in place, the glossary, so they can understand my language. The other thing that they have is the mindset, because they're already at the pioneer of their own work. So they understand the mindset, and they're already speaking the other languages of Mother Nature. So they can take the other languages of Mother Nature. She's got 18 of them, by the way. And they can translate what I'm saying relatively simply because they're able to take the 18 languages and convert it over to something that they understand. Because relativity, relatability, is 100% the only thing that we connect on. If you don't relate, then you've lost relativity to the focal point, which is my point. It's exactly what we're talking about here, the point. So in order to establish relatability, you have to have your literal position defined. We call this triangulation in mathematics and in logic. So that you have to be able to define your own position in relativity to the point. So everything is measured in relativity to the point. Now, if you do not know what the point is, non-scientists do not, they're not able to make any kind of a relative discussion or comprehension of something, which is why they struggle so much with a lot of things in life. It's because they do not know what the point is with the focal point in order to determine relativity so they can figure out where they are. This is called triangulation. It requires 3 data points. Now, this is also where a lot of non-scientists get this messed up. They think that in order to know where you're going, you just need 1 point, which is a compass, and this is not true at all. Other people think that you need 2 points, where you're going and where you want to go, where you are and where you want to go. This is also not true. You need 3 data points. You need to know where you've been, your origin, in order to triangulate it with where you're going and then the present. That way you can measure the distance of the origin and also where you're going so you know how much longer you have to get there. We're back to calculus again in geometry. So when I'm talking to people over in the science world, they know all this because they have the integrated knowledge that they could just convert this easily over into something they understand so they can translate what I'm saying rather easily because their minds are already situated in that mindset of the abstract. But when you get over into the common language, there is no of that knowledge does not exist. So as a result, they're not able to take what I'm saying with any kind of understanding because they lack the relativity to the focal point. The problem is the focal point is not defined among them, so they don't have an origin. They don't have a focal point. So there's a lot of time spent from those people trying to tell me what words I should use. I don't converse with those people because, well, you should not be telling other people what words they should use. That's offensive, it's insulting, and it's actually a trait of narcissism. So I get away from people who tell me what words I should use right away because I know they have consumption and I know how highly contagious that is and I don't want it. So I get far away from consumption when someone tells me what words I should use. So now I'm looking in this section trying to figure out the best way to bridge the gap between point A and point B to help the communication so that the circuit can work optimum, can be working at its optimum status. And that's where I'm really struggling. This is where the whole thing falls down because I'm going, I have no idea what to do. I have no idea. Ideally, it'd be let's go educate the mass. That way they all get the focal point so they have this data. But how now do you educate 8 billion people, the non-scientist portion? And of course, it has to be done consensually. A lot of them won't want to do that, which is okay too. But that just means that I won't be communicating with them. Furthermore, it also means that there will be no communication with them, so they won't get this information, which again, they really need. So now it comes the ethical question. Do I bother converting this information over to somebody who's not even willing to do the basic work to learn the language, and or do I just focus on the people who are willing to do the work? Of course, I'm going to focus on the people who are going to do the work. That's easy peasy. That's a given. Now, for those people, we have the educational courses in place so that when I talk and say what I need to say, I know, hey, they can go right over to triadic healing. They can start learning the language. They'll get their focal point. And the best part is it cures your mental illness while you do this. So while they're doing all of that, that allows for that. And in the meantime, I've got people over there who still refuse. And this comes down to that ethical question. You just can't help people who won't help themselves. What this means is that gap is going to get bigger. And this is where I refer to them as the modern Neanderthal. And the modern Neanderthal, and I guess that's really what I'm up against, is how much energy do I want to invest in the modern Neanderthal? Now, the people who come over, and this is the other question, do I want to focus all of my efforts on the people who naturally will help themselves and come over? Now, before we talk about whether or not I'm going to waste my energy on people who won't help themselves, I'm not actually putting energy into the people who are helping themselves because it's all DIY. The work is already there. They just got to go do it. So now I'm looking at marketing. And I'm looking at just basically getting the message out there so they know, hey, we have a message. We're delivering a message. While everyone else is talking about what the problem is and what they should do, we've already got the solution, we've built it, and we're already implementing it. Now we are in the delivery stage, and we are in the messaging stage and marketing. So that's where we are with our work. Our being the Radical Global Healing Plan and the Resurgence, which is literally the healing engine and what we're doing with our societal upgrade to update society. It's a societal plugin, which is what you do when you have literally societal psychology, Pythagorean psychology, and the cure to mental illness. You give it to the people and you plug it into society. So now we're looking at the marketing, the messaging, and the delivery. Now, the delivery is pretty much in place. Now we're asking the question, well, I've already solved all of those other equations. So now I'm looking at the part of the equation I haven't solved yet, which is, what do I do about the modern Neanderthal? And that's really the ultimate question. What do I do about the modern Neanderthal? Because the modern Neanderthal is not going to do the work to realize what they need to realize to come over because of the communication gap, which really isn't their fault because the educational system is really fucking shitty. So as a result, the modern Neanderthal is a victim of the shit education that failed to educate them. So now, because of that real shit education, the modern Neanderthal can't understand 90% of what I'm saying. So now we have to translate it into the language of the modern Neanderthal just to get it to them. So now we have to take abstract concept and thought and language, convert it over into a literal and concrete language that the modern Neanderthal will understand. And then we have to create a marketing campaign just to translate it for them. The problem is these are people who do not have abstract concept because they have no imagination, which is why they are plagued with being a modern Neanderthal. So, what is going to happen if we do nothing is they will die out just like the modern Neanderthal. They will continue to age. The expected, everything that is anticipated will happen of human beings will continue to happen with the modern Neanderthal, and they will eventually die out while the gap expands. They're going to continue to significantly suffer while the rest of everyone has significant abundance. And the question, this is going to create a schism. This is a schism that is not, it's already in place, it's already happening. This is part of societal psychology, is when you see that shrinking middle class, it's because you are actually witnessing insider point of view of resource partitioning, which is located over in biology. So what you are really experiencing with the shrinking middle class is literally insider point of view of resource partitioning. It's the weaker, sicker element of society breaking off and disintegrating into non-existence because they're dying, which is why you have the shrinking middle class. Resource partitioning, we see this in plants all the time. Societies do this as well. So we're looking at this, stepping back, going, do we want to try and stop and interrupt the resource partitioning? And this is really the question that we're asking at the Healing Engine and the Radical Global Healing Plan. Do we want to stop and interfere and try to prevent the resource positioning of our society that is currently taking place? I say yes, absolutely. If I can stop it, I want to stop it. I have the energy to stop it. I have the knowledge to stop it. But we, in order to do this, have to get through to the modern Neanderthal. And now we have the communication barrier. So this is one of the elements that we're currently contending with, because everything else is set. We're working on delivery. We're working on the marketing. We're polishing the messaging. That's all set. And that's all done. And now it's just a matter of what do we do about the modern Neanderthal? So that's still a question. It's not a question of what are we going to do? It's how are we going to do it? And we don't know how. And if we can't figure out how, we won't be able to. So we literally have to problem solve. How do you save the modern Neanderthal and help them come over in a way that they can understand it, because the educational system has dumbed them down that much. An educational system is absolutely not what people think it is. And because they don't know what it is, it's been misused. Educational systems are literally the formula and the seed of growth, or they're supposed to be. They are literally the nourishing seed of life. I know a way I can say this real simple. It is the seed of the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. That is what an educational system is. But that's not how they're used for. How they're being used for is a propaganda marketing train to drive the agenda of the adults running them. So they've taken the seed that is the tree of life and tree of knowledge, and they've converted it over into a propaganda train for an adult agenda. So instead of a child getting the seed that is the tree of life and knowledge, they are instead getting propaganda agenda to become obedient puppets for the agenda of man. And as a result, we have the modern Neanderthal who runs on the propaganda of the agenda of man, and they're dying because they never received the seed of life and knowledge, which is what an educational system actually should be. The ancient Greeks built their educational system off of the seed of life and knowledge, and they embedded it into Plato's curriculum, which is where I got it, which is where I learned all this, which is how I know about the science of growth, which is why and how I'm converting it over into the healing engine with a radical global healing plan to insert it into society to give us all a societal upgrade. But the modern Neanderthal is an agent of the propaganda of the agenda of man. And as a result, they don't understand because they never got the seed of life and knowledge. The problem is there's a fulcrum, which is which side of this you're on. And if you are so far gone, there's no saving you. You're too far gone. If you're closer to that fulcrum point, we can bring you over if you consent and if you want to. But if you don't, it's all about your consent. It's 100% about whether or not you want to. If you want to, we can immediately get you right over. But the problem is getting people to understand what we have so we can get them over, because your consent is 100% what matters. And if you don't consent, we're not touching this. We will not touch it, because your power of choice and your right to reject is the core principle of all of this, which means you need to be informed before you agree or consent. Now, here's the problem. How do you communicate properly so that you can have an informed, educated decision to make an informed decision to choose to consent if you're too uneducated to even understand the fine print? Hence, the modern Neanderthal. So that is today's conundrum that I'm working on solving at this time. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and continue to build the educational system that I have. We are in the process of dropping this into Africa, and we have several places already in line for it. We are also building up a teacher training school. It's literally part of our parenting, adulting, and DIY school. And we also train teachers, and we polish them up for this particular program. If you're interested, go ahead and take a look at the link below for my contact information, and we'll get you set up. Thank you so much, and may the kindest of words always find you.